Welcome to the Corporate Storytellers Club podcast, the place for ideas on how to find, how to hone and share stories that ignite and inspire. Coming up today, we're going to talk about when and how you can use stories to build really authentic connection with your target audiences. Today, I am delighted to be joined all the way from Atlanta by Jamie Turner. He is the CEO and founder of 60 Second Marketer. He's an author, a TV contributor, a speaker, and a great pal. Hey, Jamie.
Hey, Eamonn, how you doing?
I am doing just wonderfully, and I'm so pleased that we're talking about this topic, which is really about how we can use stories to connect much more authentically with people. But maybe you'd give folks a little bit of backdrop to the kinds of things that you're doing today on TV and online, and also when you're speaking in terms of using stories.
Yeah, well, I get asked to come down to CNN and talk about various topics, generally around branding, which is my area of expertise. And so we'll go in and they'll ask me to comment on the Donald Trump brand or even some movie stars, personal brands, things like that. And the art there is how to get something across in a very short, sweet amount of time. So you've got about 20 seconds to give them any answer. You really can't go longer than that. Otherwise, the interviewer, they kind of go off on a tangent. So the art there is how to be authentic, how to connect with people, and how to tell a story in as short a period of time as you possibly can. And the technique I use there is usually I reference something that people are already familiar with. So I'll say, as an example, well, we all know that Steve Jobs did a fabulous job with Apple, but here's some of the challenges Steve Jobs faced. Everybody knows the biography of Steve Jobs, so it saves me time. I can get the point across very quickly without having to go into here's who Steve Jobs was. On the other side of the spectrum is standing on a stage, and you've got 45 minutes or an hour keynote or an hour and a half workshop, whatever it is you're doing. I have found storytelling really works well on the stage. Here's why. When you talk about data, people get in a critical mindset. They listen to the research, they listen to the data, and they're judgmental. Well, I don't know if 47%, is the right number there. I'm not in that category, all that. When you tell a story, they remove the critical thinking behind it, and they participate in what it is you're saying. So suddenly you're bringing them into the story, and you can spend 5 or 10 minutes telling a story that leads up to one key point. And when you do that, what you've got is they're there with you, living through the story that you're telling for 5 or 10 minutes, which builds this bond with the audience. And then, of course, you make the point at the end. So storytelling and authentic storytelling is a great way to connect with people, whether you're doing it on TV or doing it on stage.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. And interestingly, of course, you also do a lot of something else, which is you've also done a lot of video over time. And again, when you're doing something that's directly you speaking to camera, so you've not got just the 20 seconds, but you've got a little bit longer in attention. How do you attempt to use stories? So if you like, particularly for people who want to understand how you get past the noise, how you get past the clutter, how you just get people to sit up and think, oh, that's interesting, I want to know more.
There are a couple of tips on video, and I have to tip my hat to a friend of mine named Tad Duree, who coached me behind the scenes. He's a branding expert, has done work for Burger King and things like that. And after I would do a video, he would always call me up and say, here's what I want you to do. I want you to just do this one little thing here. And these little things added up to the ability to really connect with people on video. Here are a couple of the secrets. One is, remember that you're on a tiny little screen, so you have to be larger than life. Same thing when you're on a stage. You have to be larger than life because you're very, very small to the person in the back of the audience. Same thing happens on video. You really have to be larger than life. The second thing is vocal variety, using your voice to go high, to go low, to slow down, to speed up. All of those things keep people leaning in on video. And then a third thing is just to make sure that you start with something that relates to them. And I've been guilty of starting with an introduction of me, and now I'm shifting over to, are you the type of person who's wondered why your sales and revenues haven't increased more than they have? And suddenly that hooks people in. I have traditionally done it where I'm like, hey, here's who I am. I'm here to talk to you today about XYZ. Now I'm shifting over to this. Hey, you're watching this video. Are you somebody who's interested in growing your sales and revenues? Or do you struggle with getting along with people at work or whatever it is? This kind of hook that grabs people in. And then, of course, tell a story. Get them involved with the story and bring them along with you in that journey before you actually tell the answer to the solution to what it is you're talking about. So those are some tips on video that seem to help pretty well for people.
Yeah, I love that actually. And actually, you're quite right about asking an interesting or provocative question, because it immediately causes the audience to be more reflective and to get instantly involved in it. In fact, it's kind of an immersive deal. I often say to people that, you know, if I go home at night and my missus asks me a question, the first thing I'm going to do is answer it. Because then she'll stop talking.
Yeah.
Sometimes. No, I joke. but actually, no, there's a serious point about that, which is that's what happens when you ask an audience a question. We are inherently thinking, oh, yeah, what about that? And that makes you wonder what's going to happen next, and that you're more invested in. So I love that. That's a great idea.
Yeah, and there's another sort of avenue on that. So asking the audience a question, as you just said, is exactly right. But then also, when you ask the question, really what you're doing is setting up a problem so that the audience is sitting there going, yeah, I have that problem, or I know somebody with that problem, or do I have that problem? I think I might. And then you have to go to the agitation stage. So the path is problem, agitate, solve. And so agitation is, do you have this problem? If you're like most people, you probably do, and you're probably frustrated and you agitate. You go in and you say, you're probably frustrated by that. You've probably tried a lot of solutions that haven't worked. You're probably trying to figure out how to break away from this problem that you're having. And that agitation side of the equation, and I mean it in the best way of the term agitation. You don't want to alienate the audience, but you want to relate to the audience. And one of the best ways to relate to them, by the way, is to say, I've had that problem too. And here's what I was struggling with. And here's the outcomes of all the struggles that I had. Then you get to the solution and say, here's how I solved it. Hopefully you can solve it too. So it's problem, agitate, solution. And then that is a way to take people on a journey with you and help them understand how to get through what they're doing and get to the other side of solving that problem.
Yeah, no, I think that's really, really sound thinking. And actually, just as you were talking there, and we were talking about, you know, agitation and getting people hooked, and really, I suppose, if I could segue maybe to how that gets translated into traction. So as somebody who does a lot of things online, and you are my go-to person when it comes to mobile marketing, essentially, just saying, what observations would you make about stories that you find, you know, if you're doing something to camera, maybe get more traction? Anything that you've noticed that's somewhat or somehow different from what you do on the stage? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, basically, the more authentic, transparent, and genuine you are, the better off you're going to be within reason. Now, I know that there's a big movement right now towards authenticity and genuineness. And what I traditionally do is I'll talk to people and say, here's a problem I've confronted. And it sort of breaks the wall down between the listener and me, the speaker, because I'm being honest with them. Now, I have seen people take that too far. I know somebody who has talked about being addicted to porn and all that sort of stuff, and that's one of his things. And I'm like, you know, if you're a business person and you're trying to help me on the business side, I don't want to hear that story. It's just not what I want to hear about. Now, if you said, hey, I've struggled with bankruptcy, that's a business topic that's related to what we're talking about, that I then I'm going to lean in and listen to you and hear how you solved your way out of that problem. But you can be overly authentic and overly genuine. Just remember, people, even though they want to know that you've struggled, they still want to know you've climbed the mountain and gotten to the top of the mountaintop. They're listening to the struggle of how you climbed that mountain to get there, but they don't want to hear the side journey you took on something that's not related to the ultimate outcome, which in my case, of course, is business and things like that.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good advice. I remember years ago, I had a professor who had a lovely phrase. He said, people love to see a bit of vulnerability and self-deprecation. He said, a little is wonderful, a lot and they'll think you're a blithering idiot.
That's great. That's great advice. I love that. A little bit is wonderful because it makes you real, but a lot makes you a blethering idiot, as you said. I love that.
There's a tweetable moment, yeah. But actually, if we can kind of flip that for a moment and just talk a little bit about things that you observe, because you would also see a lot of speakers, you would see a lot of communicators, and you would help people, I suppose, to shape what they do. So if there were 2 or 3 things that you think kind of gets in the way of being truly authentic as you're sharing stories, any thoughts come to mind? What have you noticed?
Yeah, actually, I do have something on that, and it was kind of interesting. And if for those of you who want to read this blog post I wrote on this, it's an in-depth blog post on the 60-second marketer. Just go there and do a search for.
Good. I'll add a link if you give that to me. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's called How to Give a Speech That Knocks People's Socks Off. But here was what happened for me is Tony Robbins, the motivational speaker, his organization asked me to speak at one of his conferences. It was a 5-day conference.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll go there and speak. I'll sit in the back of the room and I'll kind of half listen to some of these speakers, and then I'll go on stage at my time and all that. Well, I'm in the back of the room and I'm watching all these speakers, and I'm like, oh my gosh, these are the best speakers on the planet. First of all, Tony Robbins is amazing. Secondly, there's everybody else who was in there was amazing too. So I started taking notes, and I said, these are the things that make these speakers go beyond the ordinary keynote and get them to that level of just sort of off the charts. The first was the best speakers aren't smart, they're dumb. And what I mean by that is they simplify the message down to something that is inspirational. So they're trying to inspire you to the next level, not necessarily get you to go in and provide you with a ton of information. Second thing was they tell stories. Tony Robbins would get up there and he would tell a story for 40 minutes that would ultimately make one point. But the fact is Tony Robbins can tell a story for 40 minutes and you're enraptured by it. And of course, when you start a story with, I was riding on Richard Branson's private jet when I had this conversation with him. Of course, you're going to listen to the story. But there were all these things that people did that really absolutely made it so that they were at the next level, and they really did something that just did it. But we'll include that in the show notes for you, because it's 6 or 7 key points that I think your listeners would love to hear about.
Fantastic. And actually, I was just, as you were talking about Tony Robbins and what have you, and, you know, the notion of there I was on Richard Branson's jet. I kind of call that the Everest syndrome, which sometimes from an audience perspective, they think, oh, wow, that's quite impressive. But, you know, not every one of us have climbed the Mount Everest or crossed the Serengeti or what have you. So,
right.
And actually, that brings me back to something that I noticed, especially in not just your videos, but also even in the email newsletters that you send out. That so much of what you talk about is really much more relatable. And is that a style thing, or well, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm glad you feel that way. I wish I could say it's something I learned and intentionally did, but from the time I was young, I was always told that I'm very approachable and very down to earth was a phrase people used a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know where that came from. I don't know. I came from a family of 6 kids, and you as someone living in Dublin, that probably every other family has 6 children in the United States.
No. We've discovered what's causing it. We're much smaller families now.
Well, in the what ended up happening is, I think part of my ability to tell a story is when you're in a family of 6 children, all 6 kids are striving for the attention of the parents. It's just a natural thing. So you learn how to get a point across quickly, how to charm people with your story, how to stand out from the rest of the crowd. And I think that probably drove an awful lot of what happens to me as somebody who's engaging. But coming full circle to the question you asked, is that sort of down to earthness something that I learned, or is it something that just comes naturally? For me, it's something that just comes naturally. If it does not come naturally for those people listening, then I just suggest being authentic and sharing some of those little pieces of information about yourself that are vulnerable and open and honest, and share that with with people you're talking to or people you're writing to. And I think that'll suck them in and grab their attention and do a lot of good things for you.
Yeah, because I would actually turn that slightly, because the down to earth bit is really that it just seems more real. Which is a nice segue to, and thank you so much for doing this, Jamie. I mean, honestly, you know, we could literally chat about these things, and maybe we'll do this down the line for a bazillion hours.
Sure.
Thinking about that notion of, you know, being real and connecting with people. If there was one thing that you would encourage people to do that you believe would really boost their storytelling impact, and maybe we'll have two elements of this, one from the stage and the other maybe in when you're creating videos, what would be top of your list, a thing that you have noticed that just makes a difference?
Yeah, I've got one, and this is actually in that blog post that we talked about. The best speakers or presenters or connectors or storytellers say things in non-standard ways. And so this goes back to that Tony Robbins speech. There was a guy on the stage who was the CEO of a hospital, and he could have come out. He was by the way, very humble and very soft-spoken, and he was probably one of the more powerful speakers there. So for those of you listening who are saying, well, to be a great speaker, you have to dominate the stage and be loud and, you know, sort of get people fired up. Here's a guy who was on the other end of the spectrum, quiet, humble, soft-spoken, and probably had the audience in the palm of his hand more than just about anybody else there. But he said things in non-standard ways. So instead of coming out and saying, we're trying to reduce the number of people admitted to our hospital by improving healthcare, and that's the normal way you'd say something, he came out and he said, we're trying to put our hospital out of business. And what happens is your brain goes, wait, did I hear that right? And all of a sudden you're sucked in, because he's telling a story in a unique way and a different way that makes you kind of be pulled into the story so that you can understand it. So remember that idea when you're doing storytelling. Be sure to do things that tell a story in an unexpected way, because all great stories have an unexpected twist that get you're going down a path one direction, and then you suddenly take a left turn. That's what gets people engaged, is when there's a left turn and all of a sudden you're going, oh, that's not the way I expected this to end. Well, I'm going to listen even closer now. So that's one of the key things I would suggest for people who want to be great storytellers, be great communicators, be great connectors, whether it's on video or on the stage.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, that twist is actually what leads to delight. And I have been delighted in this conversation this morning. Jamie, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Oh, Eamonn, I really appreciate you having me on. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. And tell me, for people who'd like to reach you and learn more about you, where should they go?
Yeah, there's two ways. You can go to my blog, which is 60secondmarketer.com. So it's 60 and then the word secondmarketer.com. Or literally, you could just Google me, Jamie Turner, Jamie Turner. And I should come up pretty much on the first page. So Google me or go to 60secondmarketer.com.
Perfect. And I will also add in the link that we talked about, folks, because that's a really interesting article. I have read it before, and it's a super read. So thank you all for listening in today. And until the next time, here's to awesome storytelling.